Welcome, friends, one and all, to today's Rally.com Big Three, sitting with my friend.
Oh, that's so nice, Bass.
Jerome Buzz Cutler. I am Leonard Bass. Masters, we're talking NASCAR racing. The 2010 season is over. 36 races in the books. But once again, Jimmie Johnson is our champion. Three big issues today. What, pray tell, is issue number one?
Well, we've been having this conversation a little bit on Rally.com. Jimmie Johnson is indisputably the champion. Is he also the driver of the year?
Yeah, he's the driver of the year. I think NASCAR's point system is a little bit off. Okay, I don't think it rewards top finishes, but I think it's a pretty good approximation of meritorious behavior on the racetrack. If you think someone else is the driver of the year, then you think NASCAR's point system is not an accurate reflection of driving skill and talent.
But Bass, if that's the case, then why have a Driver of the Year award? Why not just have a championship if they're just automatically going to be the same guy every time?
I agree. I think that's right.
Bass is doing away with the Driver of the Year award.
That's out!
I believe that the Driver of the Year can take into account intangibles and not just sort of say, all right, this was the MVP, this was the best guy out there. I think, for instance, what Denny Hamlin overcame, the struggles he overcame with his knee, could mean that he's Driver of the Year. I think Kevin Harvick's consistency could mean that he's Driver of the Year. I don't think it automatically is the guy who won the championship.
I kind of do. I think it's sort of like, if you're in a team sport, then the other guys around you have more, and racing is a team sport. I mean, I guess you could make the argument that, hey, this guy's a really good driver, but he was sabotaged by his team or sabotaged by his equipment. But I just don't know how you figure that out. I think in football, the quarterback was sabotaged by his offensive line. He puts up great numbers. Maybe they don't make the playoffs, or maybe they get knocked out in the first round. You might say he's the best quarterback anyway. But I think it's hard to make the argument. It's hard to figure out how, well, Denny Hamlin's was a better driver than Jimmie Johnson this year. Jimmie Johnson ends up beating him on the racetrack.
Well, that's just the thing. I'm saying Driver of the Year isn't necessarily who is the best driver.
Well, maybe
on
that's
the track,
it then.
in my opinion.
Okay.
But otherwise, why have the award? Unless you're like several members of Rowdy.com who say that the championship this year didn't go to the best driver.
If you think NASCAR's system doesn't reward the true champion, then you have a different argument to make.
All right, let's move on, shall we?
Yes.
Issue number 2. Big news. Well, I don't know how big the news was, but Richard Petty Motorsports yesterday indicated that they will be around in 2011.
Yes.
They are contracting from 4 cars to 2 cars, and we don't know the details of their reorganization. It could be nationwide only. Who knows at this point?
I don't think so, Cutler.
But the question is, will they come out of all this mishigas better than they were going into it?
Well, yes, in a couple key areas. Number one, if they are really debt-free, they won't have that hanging over them. Number two, as A.J. Allmendinger said, Cutler, and it sounds like a cliche, but I think there's some truth to it, by going through this kind of thing, and think about how they've performed. Again, I say to you, they have performed remarkably well given all that's hanging over their head. Yes, I know they get their cars from Roush Fenway, and that team's been on the upswing, and they're benefiting from that. I understand that. But these guys still have to go out there as drivers and team members and perform all race weekend long, and they've done that. 4th and 5th in the final race of the year with all this crap hanging over them. I think that does bode well for the future if they can keep this group together.
I also couldn't help but think about what Jimmie Johnson said about 2004 and 2005, about what he learned by going through those struggles of not winning the championship. And I don't know if it's a directly applicable analogy, but I think there is something to be said about learning from adversity. And the thing I'll say about the Roush Fenway relationship is both Richard Petty and was it Carl Edwards or Greg Biffle said, hey, look, Roush Fenway got as much from Richard Petty Motorsports, if not more, then vice versa.
And that may be lip service in some way, but I think that there is some potential, if they've perfected really their satellite team relationship and the sharing of information and how that works. Don't forget this was the first year for that whole deal as well.
Right. And
first year with Ford and all that stuff. So
and you got to say that Paul Menard's performance, A.J. Allmendinger's performance in 2010 exceeded expectations. Sure. In every way, shape, or form. Marcus Ambrose has always been seen as a guy with a lot of potential, but perhaps not necessarily the support to realize that potential.
We'll see.
So I think the future is ironically bright for for Richard Petty
You
Motorsports.
know, you got to get to the bottom.
Depending
so
on
you
how
can build.
they come out of this
Right.
organization.
I'm assuming that what's going to happen is they're going to sort of rise from the ashes as a new entity, and they're going to have their debt problems settled, and they'll be able to move forward without a bunch of stuff hanging over their head. And if all those things are true, I do think they could be a surprise team next year. I've seen enough out of those guys.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Marcus Ambrose win on an oval. I wouldn't be surprised to see A.J. Allmendinger consistently in the top 15.
I wouldn't be surprised to see A.J. Allmendinger win a race next year.
Let's move on, shall we? The one thing that I think we still have not addressed from this past weekend
Yes.
is Kevin Harvick v. Kyle Busch.
Who is the meanie? I think that's
a couple
the
of
question.
two-faced clowns.
Well, I thought Kevin was two-faced and Kyle was a clown.
Oh. I don't see how you can say Kevin was two-faced when he basically said...
The reason, no.
Yeah,
I'll tell you the reason.
Yeah.
I'll tell you exactly the reason.
Because they were nice to each other in pre-race?
But Kyle believes that Kevin is nice to him off the racetrack, but treats him like a goon on it. You know, so I think
that's like saying opposing football players are buddies and go out to dinner together, but then once they get on the field, they're locked in Mortal Kombat. That's the name of the game.
I suppose. I mean, it's a little bit different than that. I think in Kyle's mind, he's probably thinking, I think we've got things settled here so that we'll kind of cut each other some slack, and I find myself cutting Kevin some slack, and then I find myself getting no slack. I think that's probably the way he feels. I'm not going to comment on whether or not that's right.
I mean, it was Kevin Harvick was running for the championship. Kyle Busch was being a teammate to Denny Hamlin and trying to make it hard on Kevin Harvick. I mean, come on. Kevin Harvick didn't lift, and I can't really fault him for not lifting.
I think from a Kyle Busch perspective, if you're Kyle, you kind of have to ask this question, what am I doing to, in some cases, there's nothing you can do. You get into something with a guy, and you get into a dispute, and you got to stand your ground and all that. But when you think about the fact that Kyle Busch, in 20% of the chase, Cutler, he was intentionally wrecked.
Really? I hadn't done the math.
Think about it like that.
Is it 20%?
In 2 of 10 races, he was intentionally wrecked in the chase.
Yeah.
Right? So you're not going to win a championship in that situation.
Right.
And that's
that is
just
correct.
Piling on too many obstacles for yourself. So what can I do? It may mean standing up for myself more. It may mean the converse of that.
It might mean shutting the hell up.
It might mean shutting up. It might mean picking my spots a little better about when I want to be aggressive. I mean, that's the thought process I think Kyle Busch needs to go through a little bit. If you've seen Kevin Harvick this year, he's actually found a nice balance between being this aggressive kind of guy on the racetrack, but being a very, very consistent finisher. So you have to say, Kevin may have made an enemy here, and that won't do him any favors later on, but at least so far, at least in 2010, he's been able to manage that dynamic of standing up for yourself, holding your ground. He's turned more than one guy. He turned Joey Logano, you know what I mean? So, but he's not really been the victim that much. All I'm saying is that in general, you somehow have to be able to avoid these situations. I don't know what you do to do that.
No, but I agree, and we talked about this in a column we wrote for NASCAR Illustrated.
Yes.
That Kyle Busch will not win a championship until he stops pissing people off.
Well, and the thing is, he
pisses off more than his fair share.
He's got to maintain those things that got him to where he is, though, and I think that's the hard question. He's got to be fiery. He's got to be aggressive, and he's got his fans because people like the fact that he's outspoken and calls it like he sees it.
Yeah.
So that's a balance, I think, and I think it's tough to find that sweet spot.
I'm not down on Kyle Busch. I do think he's entertaining, and I think that the black hat has to be worn by somebody.
Sure.
And I'm glad.
And the black hat can win.
And I'm glad he's chosen that role. But all I'm saying is it's not a formula for success if success is measured by championships.
Think about how Earnhardt, one of the things that people may not realize about him is how well, despite his aggressive behavior on the racetrack, how good he was at diffusing those situations and not having them linger and carry over.
Kyle Busch does not necessarily know how to deal with people, or at least how to spin things, or how to use the media to his advantage.
How to work it, baby.
As a matter of fact, he probably uses the media to his detriment
at times,
more often than not. And we're not going to be doing any more videos this week.
We're taking a break.
We're taking a little Thanksgiving break.
Right.
Turkey
Day.
We got to go catch us a turkey.
Yep.
And those things are fast.
They're
too.
fast. They're meaner than you think. Cutler.
Yeah, they got that waddle.
Yeah,
waddle. Is that what that's called?
I think so.
A waddle.
They waddle and they got a waddle.
But they don't fall down.
That's a weeble.
Rowdy.com. Say it like it is.
Say what like it is?
Rowdy.com.